So this is a kickoff meeting for the Eden Chief Delegate call. My name is Edgar Fernandez. I'm co-founder of Adania, which is a company that's been focused on building Web3 solutions and working in EOS mainnet through EOS Costa Rica. I'm really excited to be here today. First of all, to meet each and every one of you a little bit better. We'll be working together for the next 6 months. And then what you ran on, what you expect to accomplish, and also what you expect from each other, and especially from me. So I'll start. I've been involved in EOS.io ecosystem since Genesis, with EOS Costa Rica as a Genesis block producer, and building blockchain-based solutions for the last 4 years out of a dev shop in Costa Rica. My main goal with running for Eden was providing more transparency and building tools to allow for more transparency in the accounting of the funds that are used. I truly believe that if we want to start collecting dues or collecting more funds from foundations and actually raising money, we're going to have to be accountable to that. And the only way that we can grow this is by showing that we have accountability to the funds that are given to us. So that was my main goal, and that's going to be my focus, is how do we make this an easy, not a red tape kind of bureaucratic way of how do we justify funds and how we're using them, but using the tech itself and the UI that we all that's intuitive, that we can use to classify how we're using our funds, and then display that and visualize that in a easy to use manner. So that's what I'm going to be focused on. That's what I ran on. That's what I was elected on. I have weaknesses. I'm not a big process guy. I'm not a big political figure. I've been a banker for 12 years in New York City, and then now an entrepreneur for the last 4 years focused on blockchain technology. So that's me. Again, very excited to be here. And then I think we can all thank the ones behind us later, but I did want to at least introduce myself. Gracie, Michael, Brock, Chuck, anybody want to go next?
Yeah, sure. I'm able to go next. So I'm Michael O'Sullivan. I'm the CEO of BuyWire News. So I basically ran my campaign on producing more content for the EOS ecosystem, which we've done quite well today. But also, for me, I think Eden has a huge potential, and I want to help realize that potential. So I want to help try and move forward with some processes, with some operations, but also with big decision making, and also trying to figure out what the meaning of Eden is, and how it can have teeth, if you like, and how it can have some real influence over the EOS ecosystem. That's what motivates me, and obviously using this technology to make the world a better place. I think that's consistent with everyone on this call. So I hope that we can all move in that direction and be pragmatic and keep our momentum going, and actually make decisions that actually affect the chain positively. So that's my kind of goal.
Thank you, Michael. Anyone else next?
Sure, happy to go. Good day. Brock Pierce. I've been involved with EOS, I think, more or less since the beginning of Block One as a company being formed, and all of the things leading up to EOS being announced, and eventually the token sale, and sort of Genesis and many aspects. And I'm a big believer in the potential of what's occurring here. I've been frustrated, like many of us, and felt powerless in terms of the ability to deliver the things that I'd like to see done. That's eventually led to me getting frustrated enough to finally just take matters into my own hands, which I took all of my stock in Block One that I received as a founder, and I converted it to EOS tokens to align my interests with the communities. If Eos fails to perform, I lose. If Eos does perform, I win. I don't like the idea of doing incredibly well personally if Eos fails because Block One's Bitcoin balance sheet and bullish and billion-dollar venture portfolio. And so one of the things that got me comfortable enough to make that massive commitment, which, you know, time will tell whether or not it was a good decision. Certainly, I think from an integrity perspective, I think it's very much aligned, you know. But Eden is one of those things where, you know, governance is one of my biggest concerns around blockchains, and how do we improve upon governance? And, you know, between Dan Larimer's book, More Equal Animals, and this early experiment, I've been involved. I was one of the first members of Eden. And I've allowed enough time to go by that I wanted to jump in and actually roll up my sleeves and join you in this process. And I'm proud to be a chief delegate and to serve with each of you. And so I want to learn through this process to see where we are. This is a lift up the hood core sampling sort of mission, but while here, make the biggest, most positive impact I possibly can for Eden, Eos, and our collective future in this project. And so as I think about the disbursement of resources that I receive as a chief delegate, I don't personally need the funds, right? I don't have a personal, you know, mission that requires them, because at Helios, I'm one of, if not the largest already Eos holder in the world. I'm at liberty to do things that most other chief delegates may not be able to, which is, how do I use these funds to advance Eden? How do I use these funds to advance our thinking of the role of a chief delegate? And so what I'm hoping to do is build a small advisory council of those that want to, like, let's think about, you know, a year from now or 5 years from now, what a chief delegate might think about doing with those funds, and evaluate all those options, and then from there make a decision. I hope that in my 3 months of service, assuming that's, you know, we're going to be, I think, approving some things here today, that we advance our thinking around, I hope that my presence as a chief delegate advances our collective responsibilities as those that step into the role in the future. And so I'm really honored to be here, grateful to the community for electing me, and look forward to hopefully making great things happen for Eden and Eos together.
Excellent. Thanks, Brock. Gracie or Chuck, anyone want to jump in?
Sure, I'll go. Morning, everybody. My name is Chuck McDonald, obviously. I started out in blockchain in about 2017, May of 2017, I believe, with Steemit. I just discovered it and started blogging on it and started playing around with tokens and you know, elegant smart contracts, you could say, or the beginnings of them. And I got hooked on it. I missed the beginning of Eos itself, Genesis, because I was licking my wounds after getting wrecked, and I had walked away from everything for a little bit. But I'm, as of 2019, an active Eos community member. I went to school for music, for jazz trombone of all things, and I shortly after I left college, I decided that I wasn't going to make any money being a jazz trombonist, so I became an electrician. I'm a union electrician with IBW here in Nova Scotia, and in the last couple of years, I've decided to really start moving towards becoming a full-time blockchain worker. So I like to write. I like to build things. I like to design things. I like to talk about designing things. I'm sometimes more vocal than I should be about things. I sometimes talk before I think. trying to leave that aside now. But yeah, I'm in Eden because I see the potential of it as a technology to help communities and to help people come together and decide to do things. And I see a ton of potential, just like everybody else here, for Eden. The thing that I would like to see with Eden is run the process more. Our process is beautiful. It's very, very, very elegant code. It's very, very well put together, and we just need to run the process more. So having a 6-month lag time between the first, election and this election was perhaps necessary, but anyway, one of my goals is to convince Eden that it is worthwhile for us to identify our tools, identify our process, and package it up into an DApp, an application that anybody would be able to use. And that's not just our election process. That would be anything else that we think of designing down the road, right? It could be our accountability tools that many of us are talking about using or building rather. Those are kind of things that we could design into sensible dApps that the world could use, and it would bring everybody to our community, and we would be a showcase for premium code, a premium community, premium outlook on democracy in general. And I think that we have a lot to offer the world if we package it up effectively, right? So there's a lot of work to do there. In terms of this, the mandate that we have right now, I believe all of us were elected with the understanding that we were going to be accepting the recommendations from the previous chief delegates. I'm totally in favor of that. And yeah, I hope we can work together and figure out a plan for Eden to maximize our potential. Thank you.
Chuck, is that what you ran on as well? Just basically the packaging of Eden and growing that, just to clarify? So there's a lot of discussion over what people should be doing in an election, right? And I'm of the opinion that we are voting for leaders for the community, not necessarily just people who are going to be funding a project, right? So I do have a project in mind that I would like to help support, and that is my Palmetto pitch for EdenElection.com, which I just basically ran down, which is to take our tools and package them in such a way that anybody in the world would be able to use them. So that is what what I would like to see happen. But primarily, I think my role is to work as a sensible individual to work with all of the chief delegates to find out what we have to do and to make it happen. Excellent. Thanks, Chuck. Gracie, please. Hi.
Hi, I'm Gracie, and I'm the CEO of JBB.1. And then my team, I worked on Eos since the mainland launch. And then all these years, we all worked to provide tools and platforms for the blockchain gamer. Just we are have a media for blockchain game. It's the first media for blockchain game in China. And then we kind of provide some tools for the gamer they can change their game to blockchain game, or they can just create on our I would not say it's an engine now, it's like a editor, and then if they create a game on it, and then they can just click one button and then it will be all on chain. And that's what I work. And then I want to say, for a few years ago, we really believe in EOS. It's a new level blockchain. Everybody, we believe that. And that's why my team moved from Ethereum to EOS. And then some of us just suffer a little bit. But now with the After next election, I work with like your support, and I trying to deploy the Eden Chinese. And then with all this work with each other, and then shows me that how well can we and can all the people all over the world work together for the same purpose. Just like we often hear the people said, now we have like several Ethereum killer now, and what will EOS do? But I think just like with Eden, we are now just like creating another level of blockchain. It's once again we move forward, and I believe just with everybody here, and then with the people in the community, and this time we really will make something, and we will not screw up this time. And then in my pitch in the election, my promise is first that I will not spend Eden's money, the budget for the delegate on my own project, and then I more prefer Eden's money to spend on just the projects that can bring the greatest benefit to EOS community, just like maybe onboarding, that it's the really make some reason for the user and then make them want to onboard on EOS kind of onboarding. And then or some kind of dApps that make people think that we should be use EOS. It's that kind of things. And then I think like work with all you guys here, that we can make some wise choice for EOS, for Eden, and then Eden will really works as EOS governance.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much, Gracie. Thanks to everybody for their intro and their ideas. I think we definitely have a diverse group here, and I think that makes us definitely stronger, bringing a lot of different points of view and ideas. I think that's going to make us definitely more robust. I think we can grab a few minutes. I know, Michael, you put this in the agenda. Anything you put thank you to the ones that served before us. Anybody have any thoughts of the previous chief delegates, what they did well, what they could have improved on, what we can do? And if they'd like to say some words, I'm sure that they're going to be watching this. So I'll start in saying that, I think it's very, very hard to be the first. As they say that, the first one through the door usually is the one that gets shot. That it's very easy to criticize and hard to step up. I think everyone that was elected before us did a great job with zero precedent, right? And hopefully we can build and improve on what they did well and what they could have improved on themselves. But just a few minutes. I don't know if anybody wants to do a small retrospective of the last mandate and anything that they'd like to see continue or change.
Yeah, sure. So I just want to thank really the previous chief delegates. They paved the way really for where we are today. They had to do a lot of the harder work in getting Eden up to scratch, and I think they did a really good job in doing that. And I think it's important for us to acknowledge that and to thank them firstly for their time. So thank you all for all the effort you put in, but also for taking that flak and for leaving Eden in a pretty good place for us to take over. I think there are some ways that we can improve it for the next generation, and I look forward to discussing that all with you. But the work they did was phenomenal. And also the bylaw changes and the way they structured it, plus the transparency and the weekly meetings. I think these were great innovation. I think it's really important we stick with all of the positive outcomes that those guys put together. I think the third point on our meeting agenda today is the ratification of those previous bylaws. So I do look forward to discussing those and ratifying them. So I think they are the right the right laws. And I also think that having shorter elections is absolutely vital to ensure that that Eden is successful over the longer period. So yeah, I just want to thank them all a lot, and really appreciate all of their transparency and the weekly meetings. And I suggest we do the same. And I also suggest that we try and limit the length of our meetings, because that's probably the only thing I would have improved in terms of their meetings last time. And I think I've got a couple of suggestions on how we do that, but we can discuss that later.
Thanks, Michael. Anybody else have any comments on the past mandate? Anything they'd like to keep?
I'll just also add, expressing gratitude to all those that served before us. As I think it's important to note in general, we stand on the shoulders of giants, and thank you to all of those that served before us. May we continue to serve well to the best of our abilities.
Excellent, thank you. Well, with that, I mean, I think the first kind of housekeeping thing is whether we want to continue to do these weekly meetings. I think we all ran and agreed that we would. And I think we want to make sure that everyone can attend and that fits in everyone's schedule. So I'd propose this time on Thursdays as the weekly time. I also propose to keep these to an hour. If for some reason agenda points aren't met on that meeting, we can either schedule an extraordinary session, or they just move to the next week. So that would be my first suggestion. Not sure if 9 a.m. Eastern on Thursdays, weekly meetings is something that you guys would approve. If not, I'm open to suggestions.
Yeah, I think it's
yeah. So the only question I have. It is my intention to be present for every one of these meetings and to continue this format. The question I would have is, how much notice is required if one of us, most likely me, but if one of us for some reason wanted to make a request to change the meeting because of some conflict? The reason I mention this, and since this is a recorded call, I will be careful with my words. I go from here to Washington, D.C., where I'll be for a couple of days, from Washington, D.C. to New York, from New York to Poland, from Poland to the U.K., back to Washington, D.C. And in these meetings, I can't really say where, but let's just say I'm meeting with heads of state. When a head of state wants to have a meeting, I have to, their schedule is more important than mine. And obviously I'm here because I care, and I value each and every one of you. None of what I'm saying is intended to say, ooh, I'm important or blah, blah. That is not my intention. But in the event that there is, conflicts like that, how much time are you flexible if needed, and how much advance notice would we want? Or would you prefer that if I have a conflict like that, that is, I kind of have to work within their calendars because they are heads of state or hold high office along those lines. I have to be somewhat accommodating. And any feedback or thoughts on how we do that? It is my intention to show up for every one of these meetings. Sometimes that will not be possible, and I want to understand our collective flexibility to potentially move as needed. That won't be often. That is not an every week thing, but over the course of a few months, that may happen a couple of times.
So Brock, I would suggest at the end of each one of our weekly meetings, you would to just review your schedule to see if there's any, if you're traveling a lot during the next week, then we can maybe flag it as a potential. But if you're not,
or I can give you also have someone, I can proxy a vote potentially. And there are a few other things that can be done. It's a weekly meeting. Missing a meeting is not a terrible thing, not a good thing, but it's probably not terrible, as long as there's good follow-up. Okay, I'm not going to be present for that meeting, Michael. Here are the things that I'd like to have said. Can you please say these things for me? I'm proxying my vote to you, and then having follow-up post-meeting of, sorry, I wasn't able to be there. What happened? Anything I need to know? There are multiple ways to work around this, but I figured it's good to comment on it now.
I think just, yeah, to highlight the schedule and proxying your vote is fine. That's not a problem at all. I think there's always going to be someone here who can carry your voice for you. So long as you just give us an email or a WhatsApp message with your position on any particular issue. I think that'd be fine. And maybe it would be good as well if we set our agendas a couple of days before our meetings. And then that way everyone has an idea of what we need to be discussing and what the likelihood, if we're going to be voting in any particular meeting. Because some meetings are going to be more important than others, right? So I think if we know that in advance, then we can make our decisions accordingly.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think we need to be flexible. I mean, I don't have a heads of state, but I have a toddler here that sometimes her schedule takes over mine. So she's very demanding as well. I would say what I suggest is we're going to send weekly recurring, and Brock, with you or your scheduler, if you just reject it or put it tentatively, whether that's 3-4 weeks ahead, then we'll know that this is not going to be working for you. I think I don't want to set 48 hours before or anything like that. I think it really makes sense of communication. Using just the decline on the invite. It will be recurring. We'll know who's going to be there or not. We'll try to do the things async as well. And I think proxying your vote, I don't know if that's in the bylaws itself, whether we have quorum, we have to have 4 of the 5 chief to actually ratify or vote on anything. That would be an interesting thing to look into. But I think being able to provide your update or proxying your vote to one of us makes a lot of sense to me. So I'd be supportive of that.
I think you've just highlighted one of the things as we were talking about bylaws today, proxies and I'm scanning it now, and we have that ability. I don't think there is anything in here.
I think it just
allows us
more than 2/3 of the chief delegates must agree on something in terms of the signature for the active permissions, and that's something that anybody could give anybody else the ability to sign for them technically, right? But I think if we're discussing something, we can certainly do that remotely. We can take input from asynchronous. As Edgar says, it doesn't all have to happen at the same time if somebody has a conflict. I think these meetings aren't law,
I will say if there is if we do need to vote on something, we can kind of schedule an extraordinary just to vote on that, get on the video, approve, deny, and then move on.
For sure.
Yeah, I mean,
So should we go through the rest of the meeting agendas and housekeeping stuff and then just nail that? So a couple of suggestions, rotating chair. So I think it might be helpful if we're going to have time meetings to have a chairperson for every meeting. And that chairperson could just hurry us along if we're getting stuck on any particular issues, and also force votes things. So I think that chairperson will have probably some advantage on the meeting. So I'm happy with just doing a rotating chair each week. I'm happy
isn't that what the head chief delegate effectively is?
I don't think they're the chair of the meeting. No, I think they're the elevated individual who receives more finance and is the head of the discussion. But I think having the same person chair every meeting is not particularly helpful. So I think if we just rotate it each week, if with the chief delegates who wish to chair, then that's a good way of doing it. I think it's the fairest way of doing it. Just because like some chairs might call votes on different issues or whatever, I don't think it's going to be a big issue, but I think that's just rotate it. It's the fairest way of doing it. Voting structure. Does anyone have any preference on how we should vote? Just to let you know, I purchased the domain eden.vote, and I thought it'd be quite cool to just knock up a really quick voting page where we could record all the votes, put them on chain, and then have others be able to see what we're voting on, even if it is only indicative of our position. I know in the last meeting, everyone just raised their hand and said aye or nay. We could do that as well. I suggest we do that for this meeting, but maybe for the next meeting, we can have something a bit more robust and transparent.
On the rotating chair, Michael, is that person setting the agenda as well?
That's a good idea. I hadn't considered that, but yeah, that's a good idea.
I have just, if there's a scheduling conflict, then that person that's in next in the rotation is not going to be able to be there. I'd like to hear from other people if they think that's something they want to take on as a responsibility. If not, I'm willing to chair, which means just basically approving the agenda or setting an agenda and making sure that I'm here. And if not, setting a proxy if I'm not.
Fine.
I view this all as an opportunity to like identify things so that eventually when those that follow in our footsteps look back or thank you for our service, and hopefully we advance this organization, its governance, its tools and whatnot, and so forth, rather. Rotating chairs sound fine. We can always reevaluate once we've done 5 weeks of rotation. I think it's worth adding to that following agenda a discussion around how we chose the chair, because there's multiple ways to choose a chair. I think that this is more, we're still in an experimental sort of phase where we have the flexibility and the freedom to try things without great risk to the things that we steward. And we should take full advantage of that opportunity, I think. And that probably also means cataloging a list of things that we'd like to do at the end of our term to modify the bylaws. What have we learned? Every probably election cycle is study our bylaws, understand how we want this document that governs us to continue to evolve. That's probably something we do at the end of our term, and probably pass it off to the next group to ratify, where we gave you the best of our thinking based upon all of our experience and our explanation as to why, and then we gave the authority of passing it to the next team. I think seems like good governance and mitigates a number of risks, but that all sounds fine to me, Michael. And from a rotation perspective, I'm happy to chair my 1/5 of the next 5 meetings.
From my perspective, I saw the CDs, rotating the chairs. It was more like sharing the load, right? It was more about sharing the workload. So I'm keen on helping in any way that I can. If it means rotating chairmanship for a meeting, then that's great. I can help out with that. Again, it's just about us working together to, if somebody can do something and help out, like Edgar running, the link for all these Zoom meetings, for example. That's really helpful. If somebody has a scheduling software that they can help out with, that's great. And rotating chairs is fantastic too. So I'm all over
it. Would you be willing and supportive of rotating chairs as well?
Yeah, yes, I think it's good, and I'm trying to do my best.
Okay, great. I mean, I think that's wonderful. Sharing the load is great, and we're not all going to be able to be here. We kind of do this internally at our company as well, and it always allows someone to be much more involved and much more present, because they're now having to look at the agenda and run the meeting. So I think that's a great. So let's do that. Let's do rotating chairs, and maybe we can just do alphabetic order. So I don't know, the next after F or something, we can just kind of run the next one. Not sure if that's all right with everybody. I don't know if that if we start fresh, that would be a B for Brock.
Well, I mean, if we're going alphabetical, we started with E, because I think that you're effectively chaired this meeting. Is that not accurate, or we're starting over at A?
I think he's an F.
Well, okay, let's.
Yeah, are you doing E or an F?
Well, if Brock, are you going to be available next Thursday? We can start with B, and if not, we can move to C, and that would be Chuck next Thursday.
Let me hold on now. Thursday is the 21st.
We'll start first name alphabetical.
Yeah, I think the 21st will be great. I'll be in Washington, D.C. Which, by the way, if anyone is in the area, the 22nd is Earth Day, and so Earth Day is kind of a big deal, and the event in Washington D.C. is kind of a big deal. And if anyone's coming through, if you're in the neighborhood, I'm happy to invite you into that, and we can do these meetings in person for those of us that are in the same area. If ever our paths cross, I am old-fashioned, and as much as Zoom and these forums have made connectivity easy and possible from everywhere, I still like connecting with people. Michael Sullivan and I got to walk Magna Carta Island together the last time I was in England, which I'll be back again soon, Michael.
I can't wait to see where you take me this time. It's usually the host that takes the guest, but with you, it's the other way around. So I always enjoy that.
Excellent. Well, thanks for the invitation. I think that goes for everybody. All right, so let's go ahead and say we're going to do rotating chairs, and Brock would be the next one. After that would be Chuck, then Gracie, then Michael, and then we'll start again with me, I guess, if we want to do that. And then against voting structure, Michael, you brought it up. I think recorded Zoom meetings when we vote and using the reaction button when you can raise your hand. I think that's one way to do it, and to, same thing as doing this. Some people, you have to turn the video off. They can still do a raise hand. That's a voting structure that works. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think for today, definitely we should do that. I think it'd be nice to have a page where we recorded all the votes. So like I said, I got that domain eden.vote. It'd be cool if they were just all listed there so people could see what we voted for. It might be 2 or 3 years time from now, but people could go back and search and see all the processes and all the individual votes. I think that'd be quite cool. It also feels like, being a blockchain organization, feels like our vote should really be on the blockchain rather than just a raised hand in Zoom. I think if we can't collectively do that, then what we're doing here, right? So yeah, we could do that. My team can knock that together quite easily, so we're happy to take on that. That's what it's like.
I agree. I think that takes probably to the next point of meeting formats and meeting notes. Not sure if that should be the person that is chairing the meeting, or that might be sometimes tough to chair a meeting and then 2 minutes.
So usually I believe in not fixing things that aren't broken. I mean, it's good to take a look at them, but you usually have a chair, right? You have a secretary.
Right.
The role of the secretary is to take the notes. Generally, that's yes, please. I'm not sure rotating the role of secretary is a good idea. I think it's generally, if someone wants to volunteer to be that person because they enjoy doing it, that might be ideal. Usually the lawyer on the board takes the role of the secretary, or the lawyer in the organization does that. And then you typically have a treasurer, which might also be a good sort of function for us to have. We each are responsible for our resources and our resource allocation, but aggregating that information and reporting that information, would also likely be the role of the treasurer. And we might want to consider, like organizations, not just Eden, but all organizations that have come before us, they thought that these were good functions and roles. We may want to consider instituting the same.
I agree. I think there's 2 paths we can take. Either the secretary, for example, could be the next person on the rotating chair, so they're actually setting the agenda already, or we can each nominate ourselves for the specific roles, right? So we already have the chief delegate that's chosen in the election. We can have a kind of a vice chief, so someone that basically steps in if I'm unavailable to take that role. Then you already mentioned one secretary, treasurer. So that's vice president, secretary, treasurer. That's 3. We'd have one more, which could be sort of on boards. It could be a fiscal position, or it could just be a general member. So we can either set position chairs and vote on those, and people need to nominate themselves, and we can all just ratify that. Or for the sake of simplicity, we can just say, all right, well, we're just going to, the next rotating chair is a person that's responsible for minutes. I agree, Brock. Usually it's someone that has that affinity that wants to do it instead of being stuck doing it if they don't want to. So what do you all think?
Could I propose a third route potentially? I think both of those routes are sensible, but there is a third option, and that might be getting someone like, I think Lenny, who's really good at producing notes or recaps, or someone from the community. We could potentially remunerate them with some of our Eden payments to watch the recording of this and just produce good high-level notes after the fact. I think it is a particular skill set to produce good notes. And I don't think it's particularly helpful for us to rotate that skill set. But I would also be interested if there's someone on the call right now who loves taking notes and is really into it, they can volunteer. But I get this suspicion that no one on this call is particularly a real diligent note taker. But if there, I could be misreading, but if anyone's into it, by all means. But if not, let's bring someone in to do that who's really good at it, who's an expert at it.
I like the idea, Michael, of, because we're a public, but again, this is, when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. The question is, what kind of notes are we looking for? Board meeting minute notes? Or are we looking for board meeting minute journalism? Is what we're here to do, really more the function of, are we one of the reasons why I've gotten involved is to create awareness around everything that we're doing here with Eden. And we don't necessarily need the board minute meetings to be that. A journalist can then also modify those. I don't think we need to make that decision today. I think that these are, things that we can put into the agenda for next week, right? Would be, everyone's got a week to nominate themselves if they want one of those roles, or to propose any alternative as next week's chair. If, I want to make sure that we are responsible with time and covering the rest of the agenda items. If you have a particular view on this, reach out to me, and otherwise, let's just assume that you have the ability to nominate yourself between now and next week in our chat, and we can vote if more than if two people or more wish to be a secretary or treasurer or otherwise. I just want to make sure that we also get through our entire agenda today.
Yeah, I think, from my perspective, I think we're just looking for minutes, as in they voted on this, Michael voted yay, Brock voted yay. We're not looking for journalism. We're not looking for a huge summary. It's just sort of a memorializing that a vote took place and who voted for what, right? I think that's the most important thing. I agree. I think we should just take a week, and then next week we can decide whether we want to take one of those positions. Which, just to summarize, so chief delegate is set by the election itself. I think there should be sort of a vice chief, which basically the only role is taking that responsibility if for some reason I am not available, or the future chief delegate. Then treasurer, which overlooks the entire funds, not only themselves, and then allocating funds and providing a report of where they are. Secretary, which would be in charge of either delegating that responsibility of these very formal meeting notes, as in this happened, votes took place, this is what happened, not sort of opinion based or a summary of the meeting itself. And then finally, usually there's some fiscal position. We don't necessarily need that unless you guys think, but if you want to nominate yourself for someone else. So vice chairman, secretary, treasurer, and then a fourth if need be. If not, that could be the fiscal. Moving on, I wanted to touch on the approved communication. Everyone's fine with this Telegram group that we've got. Everyone's fine communicating through there, sharing meeting notes, or just general chatter that we can do async. Everyone good with that? All right, so that's going to be our official kind of communication channel. And then time meetings and discussions. Michael, you put that on. I propose an hour meeting, and respecting everyone's time with that. If there's things that we don't get to, that gets pushed to any other agenda, if it's urgent or pressing, we can vote for an extraordinary meeting between this week and next week. Everybody okay with that?
Yeah, I just want to make a quick point. I think today's an example of that. I think we need to time the specific elements in the agenda as well. I probably should have done that on my agenda, but I think we need to have some indicative timing on how long we spend on each section, so we're not kind of rushing towards the end of a meeting. Because we've only got 12 minutes now. I think we probably spent too long on thanks and stuff like that at the beginning. So let's just time each section and have a really robust, high tempo meeting.
Yeah, which the chair would be responsible for keeping us on.
Yeah, like a composer in an orchestra.
Excellent. So I think we did discuss on how we plan on working as a group. We did have an open discussion at the beginning of kind of what we think Eden objectives, focus, and meaning is. We're going to get more into that on every week. I think those are somewhat general and important, but things that are going to resonate through every single meeting. So let's set the ratification of previous chief delegate bylaws. Do we want to move to do that?
Yeah.
Yep.
So
Okay, great.
So the way that, again, if we want to stick to traditional formalities, is someone would make a motion. I'm happy to make a motion to ratify the bylaws. Someone in the group then would second that motion. And then,
yeah.
And then we'd say all in favor or nay. I mean, if we want to kind of operate, I would recommend we stick to traditional.
100%. I agree as well. Does someone have the link to the bylaws that we can just throw in the chat, so we can just make sure that we know that we're voting on the same or the least or the most recent version of it? Thank you, Michael, for doing that. So these are the bylaw proposals submitted on March 26th that need to be approved by a 2/3 vote.
I would suggest we go through each point individually. So whoever's the chair reads out the first point, puts it to a vote, and then we vote.
Perfect. I'll do.
Yeah, so
We're not voting on them individually, right? We're voting on it as a package.
Individually.
I mean, one problem that clearly already exists that is obvious to me that is this concept of continuity in a board. The idea that no one from the prior board is with us in this board meeting historically has been if we look at history and like past organizations, that is bad. There's this thing called knowledge transfer and continuity. And one of the things that's lacking here and why you have staggered boards, right? There's a reason we have odd numbers. There's a reason why we have staggered boards. And just trying to learn from the past. We don't have to reinvent everything. I'm just looking at all of us here because we're all here for the right reasons. We all want to help, but there's something that we may want to think about in terms of how do we continue to improve upon this organization. And one of the things that stands out is an elephant in the room is the lack of knowledge transfer and continuity that exists as we all kind of sit here and there's like things we're talking about 101 stuff that should just kind of be automatic as a new board member shows up, here's how it works, here's what we're doing, which also has its own issues, which throw 5 new people together, we might come up with something new that's awesome, but we may also burn down the house accidentally.
Agreed. All right, should we go through these then?
We're not voting on each point individually, right? We're voting on this as a package, right? We can read it down, but then we're ratifying the entire document with one vote.
Well, I imagine that there's a room for discussion if there's anything that we question, and we may not even vote on it today if there's insufficient time. This may be next week. I don't think anyone should feel that there's unless I'm missing something, that it has to be done today.
I completely agree.
It does not.
It's probably a good idea to schedule a vote for next meeting is probably a really good idea.
I would second that, especially because if there's anything that comes up, to your point, Brock, about continuity, and if we want to inquire the past chief delegates of why this is involved and why they'd chosen this, I think that would leave us that opportunity. So one thing I will mention in the bylaws, which we'll just go through right now, it does say that they're indivisible in single documents, which to me means we're voting on it completely. And if there's something that we don't agree upon, then we have to redraft this. Maybe I'm interpreting that wrong, but that's what I view, that you're voting this as a package.
Yeah, that was the intention of the previous CDs, that this is a complete document. It's very, very concise. And if we do not ratify the complete package, nothing gets ratified, and we have to propose something for the next round.
Right. So we'll see if we want to vote on these at the end of this. Let's go quickly through it. I'm going to just share my screen, and if you guys can confirm, we're looking at the Eden on Eos Bylaws Proposals submitted on March 26th by the previous Chief Delegates. The first one is a mission statement to create value for the Eos ecosystem. The size of the independent Eden community shall not exceed 10,000 members. Representatives, known as delegates, shall be elected via the following process: randomly organized, roughly equal sized groups of 12 or fewer, where total numbers of groups equals the population divided by the average group size. Each group must select a delegate from their group with greater than 2/3 approval of votes cast, and select delegates must vote for themselves. The process shall repeat fractally by randomly grouping the delegates approved in the previous rounds until final representatives known as chief delegates are chosen. The head chief will be selected randomly from the final group of elected CDs. The final group will not elect the top representative, sortition will. Anything on points 1 or 2? All right. Elections shall occur every 3 months and may be triggered by a petition of greater than 2/3 of all delegates. So that is a notable change. The Eden on Eos community may adopt bylaws which contain all rules, processes, and regulations binding to anyone who wishes to remain a member. The active and proposed set of bylaws are indivisible, single documents. Example, the former CDs cannot provide the next set of CDs numerous options. This is a one option we've been provided to ratify. Bylaws may only be ratified if we are proposed at least 14 days in advance of the prior election. Noting the date of March 26th, these were submitted 14 days in advance of the prior election. The CDs can act inside the existing bylaws. The CDs can propose a new set of bylaws. The vote to approve a proposed as well as ratify a proposed set of bylaws shall be approved by a greater vote than 2/3 of the CDs. Any questions or clarifications needed for point 4?
Yeah. In point 4C, it says it uses the word can, and that's an optional word, right? It could read the CDs shall act inside the existing bylaws, or it could read as the CDs have the option of acting inside the existing bylaws, right? So can is slightly ambiguous there, just to mark it.
Just to say, I think that's probably the prime reason why having all of the bylaws wrapped into one package is not a good idea, because by the letter of the law, we should probably vote to fail that, because that's an option to work within the laws. I'm not proposing we do that, but I'm saying, like, in the future, I think we might need to think about this as an issue, because it would be crazy to reject the 10,000 members or the mission statement because you didn't agree with one of this particular points, or because there was a typo in the bylaws or something like that, and that would just delay everything. So just flagging it now, I'm happy with these as they are, but just as a general point of reference.
Yeah, I concur.
Chuck, would you like to put that as a comment in the shared document, just so we can memorialize that?
Sure.
And then we can decide whether we want to ratify or not. But since you brought that up, it'd be best if you put that as a comment. And point D also points out we can propose new set of bylaws, which could be this with that change, if need be. Moving on to point 5, as part of the election process, the chief delegates will have their Eden account keys replace the previous CD Eden account keys that hold the active permissions of the Genesis Eden account. A threshold of greater than 2/3 is required for all account transactions. When appropriate, a time delay will be used on the account actions with a delay that ensures the next set of elected CDs have a 7-day opportunity to cancel the transaction. Anyone have any thoughts or clarifications on this?
So just to clarify, we would provide our open active keys from our main account, our Eden accounts, to this multi-sig, and then we will have to, a super majority would have to decide any payment transfers. Am I understanding that correctly?
I don't think we have to provide anything like that. Our keys are just on our accounts right now. They'll be copied over essentially after this, right? Is that the?
Yeah, they're public. Okay.
But yes, sorry.
So this would be moving. This would be moving that the Genesis Eden account becomes a multi-sig with the current chief delegates. To summarize, is that correct? Okay. Head chief delegate funding allotment will be equal to what a regular chief delegate will receive. That is different to what it is now. It would be equal. Not sure if that changes any code part. I don't have anything against this. Any questions, comments?
What is the role of the head chief delegate if it's not to be the chair of the meetings and if it's not to have greater funding allotted? What is the role of the head chief delegate?
That is a great question, Brock. In my opinion, the chief delegate sets the agenda, right, or approves the agenda, because that's a powerful thing to do, right? Whatever's on the agenda is what defines where we're going, and allocates funds accordingly, right? Now, both changing a rotating chair and making them equal to a chief delegate changes that, right? It becomes more of a figurehead and more of a sort of, not even a final say, right? But more of a figurehead, right? But equal.
I'm not even sure it's a figurehead. It just has the word head in it.
So both rotating chair, as I mentioned, I think setting the agenda is extremely important, right?
That's the
setting
role
what
of
we're
the
going to
chair.
talk about.
That's
Correct.
the role of the chair, right?
That's correct. So I agree, right? If by changing the rotating chair and by changing the funding allotment from head chief to a regular chief, the position loses a lot of its power or influence. And I believe, and this might be a question for the previous chief delegates, they did that intentionally, right? I don't know what the reasons were, but definitely this is reducing the influence of the chief delegate.
So I think reducing the influence of the chief delegate was intentional and is the right thing to do in this context. But it's not to say I don't think we should find a new role for the chief delegate that we haven't necessarily conceived of in our new or our next set of bylaws. But the way I understand it is normalizing the income will provide fairness for all chief delegates. But I do think there's an opportunity for a chief delegate to maybe be a decision maker should there be a split vote or a tied vote or a supermajority not available. But I think the fact of equalizing pay and also having the rotating chair, I mean, I don't see why one individual should have a chair. I think we've kind of discussed that already, but like you identified, Edgar, it's a very important role. And my understanding of Eden was that the chief delegates, the final chief delegates, they have they're all of the same quality to be a head chief delegate. So that's why you use sortition. So it's just random. I do agree that there's a hole for it, but I don't think setting the agenda is what it should be, because I think we had a good discussion on that. I think showing that's right. The funds, okay, we could debate that. Maybe that's a point for the chief delegate, but there should be more funds anyway in Eden. So I think we should.
I would say that we then move to ratify these next week after further discussion. I would also point out that I pledged to ratify these bylaws in my election. So I don't intend to necessarily change this because I've already pledged not to. Although we can ratify and then propose a new one, right? I mean, I don't think that is necessarily a bad thing. But I don't think we should vote on this today. I think that should be the first. I move to put this as a first agenda item for next week, the ratification of these bylaws. Just in terms of thoroughness and completion, let's finish the last 3 points. Membership is voluntary. Members may leave at any time by executing the resigned contract action. All new members might be invited by 3 existing members on video, and a new member must agree and read the bylaws as enacted by the chief delegates. Each new member will pay 3 EOS to join the Eden on Eos community. Anyone second the motion to move this as the first agenda item for next week?
Before you place the motion, I just want to say that my understanding was that I personally ran on ratifying these decisions as soon as possible. So I feel like if there is consensus right now for us to ratify these, and if we did pledge to ratify them, I don't see the benefit of waiting until next week. I think we should have our vote now and ratify them, because we've all known what these are in advance of today. I stand firmly behind these, and I don't see why waiting another week unless we have an intention to change to break our electoral pledges, which is fine. We can make that decision, but if we don't have those intentions, then why not just vote today?
Michael, I mean, your own words were pointing out a flaw in language and what that opens up. I mean, I've not heard anything here where anyone has expressed any intent to do anything other than to effectively approve the bylaws in all or for all intents and purposes, everything that matters within them, taking on the responsibility of, making sure that we've effectively dotted I's, crossed T's, and fixed any misspellings or typos, I don't think is at odds with everybody's pledges. If anything, that's I think taking on the responsibility of being chief delegates to make sure that everything is in its proper order. I do understand the desire to act with immediacy, but we've directly in this call identified a problem in the language, and to actually make a call to the prior chief delegates to understand if there was an intention behind that language before approving it, or oops, they made a mistake. I think it might be foolish of us to just, they may have said, oh yeah, good catch. And, all of a sudden, I mean, this is a document that should be treated like the Declaration of Independence. I'm not sure that which is worse. Just not approving things right now, or approving a document as it wasn't intended to be.
Sure. Can I just weigh in briefly, because the outcome of not ratifying it doesn't mean we can amend it. We can't actually amend it. So if we're going to sign it this week or sign it next week, we can't change the typos or the details. We can either ratify it or not ratify it and produce an entire new set of bylaws with the ratification fixed, because they're indivisible. So what I'm saying is, we should ratify it now and then try and fix it with new sets of bylaws if anything's wrong, because we can't change this. If we don't ratify this, then there's 6 months elections and everything stays the same. And I don't think that's what the community wants. So I think we can ratify it and problems after the fact.
I'll let you chime in here, please.
Yeah, I think if we're following proper process, you have a motion, the motion is seconded, and then there's a period of discussion, right? And one of the things that we need to discuss regarding this motion is the implementation of this motion, right? And how each of these are going to be implemented before we have to, I would say we have to run down each point and say exactly how we're going to see these through, right? Code needs to change for this to happen. We need to identify somebody who's going to change that code. We don't really have these processes in place to implement these. We're saying that yes, it will be done, but I'm just saying that it might be good and it might be an idea to invite the former head chief, Aaron Cox, to come onto the next call to explain exactly what the intention of the language was there in where we have a question, right? Is there a need to follow the bylaws exactly by the letter, or can we make a decision not to, right? That's what the word can sort of opens up. It's a can of worms, literally. I don't know. I'm in favor. If we don't have the time right now to ratify them with a discussion, then maybe we should just put ratification aside until next week, because it doesn't. I hear what you're saying, Michael. It doesn't change anything in the grand scheme of things, whether we ratify it now or not, because it's either yes or no, right? But it does change in the way that we implement them and the way that we conceive of these bylaws. So it might be worthwhile to have another small period of discussion on actually how we're going to do this.
One other, Chuck, one other thing to add is it doesn't have to wait until next week. If Michael, you're raising and saying this, you wish this to be treated with as an urgent item, this can happen quicker. It doesn't have to be all 5 of us scheduling a call with Aaron Cox. We can go, I mean, if the desire is to move as quickly as possible, we can move faster.
I would suggest then that we reach out to Aaron Cox with this question on a recorded call. Chuck or Michael, if you want to do that. If not, I'm happy to do that. Chuck, you brought up that question, so maybe that's something that you can, if you'd like, between now and next Thursday. And I would again repeat that we put this as the #1 agenda item for next Thursday. And then just have one more week. I know that I don't think a week is going to change really whether we're dealing with this with urgency or not. I think it's dealing it with the weight that it needs to be. So
But we're setting a precedent either that we believe in the details or we don't. And so there's either way we are where we are. If we do it immediately, there's criticism that we're going to receive for basically not having. But we've identified the issue here. There's a continuity issue and a knowledge transfer issue. And yes, maybe we should have all done this work prior to this first meeting offline so that we had all these answers present today. But we've identified the primary issue, and that is that we have a new board and no continuity. And therefore, we're like, why did the last group do what they did? Was this intentional or unintentional? We've got a can of worms here. Do we open it, or do we keep it sealed? I don't think that anyone can give us too hard a time. And fortunately, we're still at an experimental phase, right? Fortunately, we're not managing all the resources of the ENF in this vehicle, where our decisions can wreak massive havoc on the ecosystem. We're still in we're in the toddler phase of this organization's life, and we're still putting our clothes together.
So I think it just a fundamental point of why we ran was to ratify these bills, and we said we would do so in our first meeting. We've read them. We can't not ratify them because then we'll have 6-month elections and we can't change them. So I just feel like we're wasting another week needlessly. We can debate them next week anyway, but the fact that we've agreed to ratify them and we've pledged that to our electorate means that that's the first thing we should do in our first meeting.
Well, Michael, I didn't pledge to ratify them in the first meeting. I'll tell you that for sure. I think we pledged to ratify them in our
Sure.
And we also pledged to be good custodians of this process, and I think that's part of it. So
can we get
in the context of time, we're 10 minutes over, so I would like to just continue to.
And by the way, and Michael, for the record, it's very clear that you wanted this to be ratified in this first meeting. You don't have 100%. The power to do that solely, so you're good. And let's relax. We that's why there's 5 of us, and there's no one that can say that you did not aggressively argue for this happening immediately. You've done your job to honor your word, and that's as far as you can go. And the good news is nobody seems to be arguing about not doing this. We're all on the same page here. It's just a matter of how we envision, being good custodians, mindful, thoughtful of the things that we do.
Sure.
I 100% agree. I don't think we're hearing anything that says we're not going to do so, but I think getting some points of clarification would make me feel better about that, right?
So there is a chance. There is a chance, That's fine. There has to be a chance if we're looking for clarification. That's all I'm saying. But yeah, just want to make that clear. There is a chance.
No, well, I don't know, because we can ratify, then move to propose new ones. That's
right. They
sorry?
have to be ratified by in the next term of chief delegates.
Correct. Great. So
I'll reach out to Aaron and get a recorded rundown of the document with him.
well, if there's some
Thank you,
time
Chuck.
that works for others, we can do that. And so
Yeah,
appreciate
but
it.
Chuck, go ahead and
Exactly.
Chuck, go have that quick call. We don't even have to go schedule it, because if Aaron's like, it's one really simple answer, like, let's not bother him if we don't have a better use. But I think setting up I think talking to the prior chief delegates, because we've identified an issue of knowledge transfer, right, and continuity, probably good for, to pick up those conversations. And yeah, Chuck, I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you for volunteering to run that down, because not anything we should be embarrassed about, but it's a little embarrassing. I feel like I've not done my job or something.
Not at all. Great. So we're gonna bring the meeting to a close at this point, and hopefully agree that we're gonna put this as an agenda item on Thursday. Chuck, if that meeting happens and you feel like you want a motion for an extraordinary session and put us all together, we can do that as well.
Sure.
Everybody.
That'll be the first item on the agenda, and again, the nominations for secretary, treasurer, and vice head chief.
Excellent.
Chair.
So anyone want to second that? We can move to approve.
Yeah, second that.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Wonderful.
Awesome.
Excellent. Well, thanks again. Obviously, so we're going to be looking forward to these meetings. I'm going to stop the recording, and then we are scheduled for the next Thursday, 9 a.m.
Just before you stop the recording, I just want to propose one extra meeting a week, for a voluntary one, for those who wish to debate some of our changes. That could be open to the whole community, and I'd be happy to facilitate that. But I think it'd be good if we just had an opportunity to have longer debates without fixed times that aren't like recorded necessarily, or necessarily part of the Eden precedent or rules or whatever.
Yeah, the more discussions, the better. The more real discussions, focused and substantial.
I don't think that needs to be approved. I think, Michael, you're more than welcome to take that initiative, and I'm completely supportive.
Yep.
So,
And Michael, make it a show, BioWire Weekly, whatever. I mean, and
Make it the Eden Town Hall.
Yeah, I mean, go build it. There's nothing preventing you, and it sounds like most of us are here to support you. We'll show up to your debates or whatever.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. I really appreciate that. That's brilliant. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, I apologize for the 15 minutes we're over on the time. Try and keep that nice and tidy. Thank you very much.
All right.
Anything else? Any final points?
Thank
If
you,
not, we'll
everyone.
close. Thank you very much.
See you next week.
Thank you.
Bye.